The Genesis account of Ishmael is an incredible account of God ordering one's step. Could you advance the slide for me one? He was a young man born into difficult circumstances. By no fault of his own, he was brought into a quarrel of wife and her servant and the husband, a battle of inheritance, a battle of doubt and bitterness. Once he was his father's prized son, a young man destined to inherit great riches, and the next moment he was cast into the wilderness with some food and a jug of water. What we are going to find today is not a story about a young man's perfect faith. We're going to see a young man struggling to adapt to circumstances beyond his control. We're going to see a young man at the end of his rope call out for rescue. Have you heard the phrase, when it rains, it pours? What about the phrase, out of the fire and into the frying pan? Both highlight our perspective. When problems come, they seem to come in waves and they seem to get harder and harder. Life seems to get harder and harder, and our only objective is to get through the problem. And as a result, we miss the fact that God has something bigger in store for us. See, when problems hit, we doubt if God is really at work in our life. We wonder if we've been abandoned. But just because we do not know God's plan does not mean God's plan is not in motion, and that's what we're going to see this morning. Studying Ishmael was a fascinating experience. I don't know if it's just my own take or what, but I think he can get a little bad rap sometimes. I've noticed myself personally, I haven't read the whole account. I hadn't before, not really, as a whole. And also, I think a lot of times I wasn't putting myself in Ishmael's shoes. A lot of times we can stand on the outside and say, oh, well, Ishmael should have done this and this and this, and he should have done this. If I were the eldest son, I would have handled my younger sibling this way. We come from a standpoint of judgment, but what we actually see is Ishmael is very similar to us and the struggles we have in our life. See, Ishmael is considered the father of who we call the people of the desert, the Muslims. He is considered this by Christians, by Jews, and by Muslims. He is considered their father. He was the older brother of Isaac, firstborn son of Abraham. And Ishmael had a very interesting beginning. It is one you don't really think about in relation to such, I put this in quotes, a godly example like Abraham. See, Abraham is the father of the Jewish people, the chosen of God. And Sarah, Abraham's wife, was having a really hard time trusting the Lord and his promise. So Genesis chapter 12, we've talked about for the last couple weeks, God gave Abraham a promise that he was going to be a great nation. But in order to be a great nation, you need some important things. You need children, lots of them. I cannot say I have a nation of the Pope family because there is a whopping 5 of us. I count that, that's terrible. And as a result, she had a servant, Hagar, and she thought in order to speed things up, she was going to help God fulfill his promise. And it was a common custom back in those times. She had her servant sleep with Abram and produce a child. This child was going to be the line that God spoke about. And as you can imagine, as soon as it happened, there was great bitterness. Hagar got pregnant. Sarah was still not pregnant. And you can imagine the family dynamics of something that played out there now. But God said, hey, Ishmael was not the promised child. God promised that Sarah would have her own child. Abraham was 86. This one down. Abraham was around 100 when Isaac, Sarah's biological son, was born. 2 to 3 years passed, and they had a weaning birthday, is what I'm calling it. Isaac had made it through the very dangerous years of being an infant and was now moving into being a toddler, and they had a big celebration. Now, before we read the passage, I want us to once again put ourselves back into Ishmael's shoes. Ishmael was around 15 years old. Some say 16, some say 13, but right around this time. And he was Abraham's child for years and years. It was only him. And then this little boy shows up, Isaac. And you've heard Abraham talk over the years about God's promise and the promise to Sarah, and there's the boy. He's the one who's going to inherit everything. He's the one who's going to get blessed by God. How would you respond to something like that? For 16 years, it was you. You're the apple of your dad's eye. And then this little twerp shows up. Now, how do 16-year-old boys typically respond in situations where they try to elevate themselves? Such as when a cute girl comes along. What do 16-year-old boys do? Pound their chest a little bit. They typically try to make fun of each other. They call dibs, like that matters. And they try to boost themselves up. All they do is end up looking like fools, but they're guys. That's just what we do. And somebody said amen. Yeah. So they do it. Now, here's this little boy getting all of his dad's attention. How's a 16-year-old boy going to respond? Trying to get his dad's attention. He's going to try to do it. So you have, boys, they do athletic feats of awesomeness. Boys tease each other, and they try to one-up each other. And here's Isaac now. There's this 2-3-year-old boy. It's a special day for him. You know what's happening. Your father's attention is now turning from you to this boy, and you're also dealing with the bitterness of your mother. It is a recipe for disaster, and that's what we have. So I want us to keep this all in the back of our mind. So we're in Genesis chapter 21. So the Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did to Sarah, verse 1, as he had promised. And Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age. At the time of which God had spoken to him, Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, and God had commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him, and Sarah said, God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh over me. And she said, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. Now, I don't want attention, but those of us who are ladies and guys over the age of 70 years old, could you imagine in your wildest dreams ever having another child? What was that? No way. So this is the situation we find in. I mean, this is, from one standpoint, it's comical. What? You actually had a child? Yes. You're nursing your child too? Yes. You didn't die giving birth to your child? No. Well done. That was amazing, guys. We'd have been impressed with Abraham. I mean, this is a big deal. This is a comical circumstance. This is funny. God has made laughter for me. I mean, this is where, I don't know if God has a sense of humor. Oh, he does. Just read the story and you'll just man, this is nuts. So this is where we are, okay? So look at verse 8. And the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham had made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, laughing. So now you have this term. So God has made laughter, but then we see the son of Hagar, this is Ishmael, the Egyptian on this day laughing and mocking and making fun of the little kid. Because, I'll be honest, the athletic feats of awesomeness of a 2 to 3 year old would not even compare with, I'm guessing, what Ishmael could do. Ishmael became a leader of the people of the desert. This guy was, we're talking like Rambo, okay? We're talking Rambo and maybe Nerd Kid, okay? That's what we're talking about. So he's mocking, he's making fun of. He's like, this kid's gonna amount to something? No, look at me, look at me. And this is where we find ourselves. So we have, Sarah then asks, in verse 10, so she said to Abraham, cast out the slave woman with her son, for the son of the slave woman shall not be heir with my son Isaac. And so due to this mistake where Ishmael is mocking and making fun of and trying to one-up Isaac, Sarah realizes there's actual danger here when it comes to inheritance. I don't know if Ishmael was possibly a little more rough with the kid than he should have been. We don't really know. We just have this idea of mocking and laughing. But Sarah begins to panic. And Sarah tells Abraham, I need you to get rid of him and get rid of her. They're dangerous. Now Ishmael, due to a mistake, is now finding himself no longer in front. He's going to get the inheritance, but in back. See, he was in the fire. Things are not looking good. He's not getting the inheritance. He's fallen behind. He's now in the fire. And what ends up happening is he actually ends up getting cast out and is actually moved to the frying pan. He is given pretty much a canteen of water, and they are sent out into the desert. He goes from being low on the totem pole of the inheritance, and now he's being cast out with the huge possibility of death that is going to come. And now here is what we're going to see. We'll see that God uses the low points to bring out something special. See, in the frying pan is where we see God at work. And we're going to see 4 ways in which he works. Look at verse 10. So, cast out the slave woman with her son, for the slave of this shall not be heir with my son Isaac. And the thing was very displeasing to Abraham on account of his son. Abraham cared for Ishmael a lot. But God said to Abraham, be not displeased because of the boy and because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, do as she tells you, for through Isaac shall your offspring be named. And I will make a nation of the son of the slave woman also, because he is your offspring. So Abraham rose early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water and gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder along with the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. Wow. Could you imagine what Abraham was going through? Your oldest son takes some water, you have to send him out. And God is like, do it. I have plans for him. See, we see 2 points here in these verses. 1, God moves beyond our mistakes. See, here's Ishmael. He mocked and laughed at Isaac. He's at fault. And God still has a plan for Ishmael. First one is God moves beyond our mistakes. And aren't we thankful that God can still use us even when we blow it? See, Ishmael, I'm 100% sure, especially with the faith of Abraham, Ishmael knew how significant Isaac was. There's a promise attached to him. And I think he struggled with it. And he blew it, he laughed, and he mocked. And in some ways, he also probably mocked the promise of God. The second point, though, the second thing that we see the way he works is God brings good out of bad. 1, he moves beyond our mistakes, but the second is he actually brings something good. He straight up tells Abraham, I am going to make the son of your slave woman into a great nation just because he is your descendant. Something very bad. Abraham about to hand water, bread, sends him out. That is a very bad situation. And he's like, God says, Abraham, it's okay. I'm going to bring something good out of something bad. The third one we see is here in verses 15 through 17. It says, then when the water in the skin was gone, she put the child under one of the bushes. Then she went and sat down opposite him a good way off, about the distance of a bow shot. For she said, now mothers, I want you to think about this and look at it. Let me not look on the death of the child. And as she sat opposite him, she lifted up her voice and wept. And God heard the voice of the what? The boy, the child. Wait, who was praying? Hagar was praying. And God said, and God heard the voice of the boy. And the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, what troubles you, Hagar? We're going to continue that in a second. I want you to think about that. He heard what prayer from the boy? We don't really know. But if we want to be just a little imaginative about it, Hagar's off. She's looking back and she puts her son under the bush and she's out of water. And I bet she's trying to get away from her son because she realizes here soon they're both not going to make it. And she didn't want to be praying right next to her son. God, we're about to die. Sorry, boy, I don't want to, make you panic, Ishmael, but we're doomed. Nope, get away. Pray, God, we got nothing. He's about to die. We don't know. And God heard the voice of Ishmael. Now, I think, in some ways that I think Ishmael realized how bad he blew it. Because you think about it, if he never would have laughed and mocked, he wouldn't have been out here under a bush, out of water, and I bet all he's thinking is, I've killed us. I've killed us. And God, I don't know. I guess that's all wrapped up into one thing. God, I got nothing. When I found this is God does not limit his plan to the chosen. I say to the, in quote, spiritual elite, Hagar was a slave. Hagar mocked and didn't have a good reputation. She made her share of mistakes. Hagar legally had no ties to Abraham now. The legal connection was gone. And so often we bring our righteous actions and what we can do into God's plan for us. Like, God, since I have been good, God, I deserve to be taken care of. That person over there is definitely not as good. So God, you definitely cannot work in that person's life as much as me. Because look at me. And here's a slave boy who got banished. Low is low, and God still uses him. And God uses his simple little prayer we find to rescue him and his mom. God still has a plan, and as a result, when we blow it and we find ourselves in the frying pan, just know that God isn't done with you. Let's keep going. Verse 7, God heard, and God, Hagar, what troubles you, Hagar, if you're not God has heard the voice. Okay, up, lift up the boy and hold him fast, verse 18, with your hand, for I will make him into a great nation. See, I don't think she'd been told this yet. We have no evidence that Abraham communicated what God had told Abraham to Hagar. We have nothing. It's pretty much, here's your bread, here's your water, send off. We have no idea. Abraham might have said, it'll be okay. I'm so sorry this has happened. I mean, I can only imagine what Abraham is thinking as he's sending off this woman and her son. But here God talks to, says, lift up the boy or take him, hold him fast with your hand, and I will make him a great nation. And then God opened her eyes and she saw a well of water. And she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. And God was with the boy and he grew up. God was with this boy who quite possibly mocked God's plan, quite possibly completely blew it. with Abraham, God was with the boy and he grew up. He lived in the wilderness and became an expert with the bow. He lived in the wilderness, Paran, and his mother took a wife for him from the land of Egypt. And that's sort of the last we hear of him until a couple chapters. But this is the last point here is God takes us for miles, one step at a time. See, oftentimes we will acknowledge that yes, God works all things for good. Yes, he has a big plan. Yes, he's gonna, let the evil people get it. Yeah. And we completely forget that in order to get there, we have to take one step at a time. Yesterday, I ran this 5K, and I ran it pushing Vera and Thea in the stroller. Yeah. Not to brag, but yeah. I'm feeling it now, though. I don't know what happened, but I'm feeling it now. But in order to accomplish the 5K, the 3.1 or 3.2 miles, in order to finish that, I had to take it one step at a time. One painstaking, laboring, I'm going to die step at a time. See, God has a plan, an ultimate plan, and he not only has that figured out for us, he has every single step figured out. In order for Ishmael to become a great nation, there was something really important that he needed in his life: water. See, God gives us exactly what we need in this moment to accomplish what he has planned for us in the future. He's given us exactly what we need in this moment to accomplish what he has planned for us in the future. It requires an act of faith, though, because I don't know how Hagar missed the water right in front of her. We're not really said, but she didn't see it. Probably a mirage. Hear those can happen to some people. But she didn't see it. And God's like, boom. See, God takes us for miles, one step at a time. Now, we do not see Ishmael until chapter 25. We just know he became a people of the desert, he got a wife from Egypt, and that's it. We go to Genesis chapter 25, verse 8 and 9. Verse 8, Abraham breathed his last and died in a good old age, an old man full of years. Oh, by the way, that good old age is 175. Yeah, okay. Died in a good old age. I love that. He was an old guy. And an old man and full of years, and was gathered to his people. Isaac and Ishmael, his sons, came and buried him. I'm not a fan of bitterness. I think it's dangerous. But you can almost be understanding if Ishmael was a little bitter. Would you not? You sent me out there to die, Dad. Did you even visit? Just sent me off in the desert. Here's your canteen. You didn't give me a camel either. You could see it. Okay, he could be a little bitter. But I don't know. I don't think he was. His father died. And he came, and with Isaac, that little twerp went and buried their father together. I think it shows Ishmael had a change of heart. Can't die on it. Maybe they, maybe they still have, I don't know. So the last we see, though, that's Ishmael. But how do you view your life when it seems to be taken from the fire and put into the frying pan? You're just like, man, I just want to get done. This is too hot. This is too stressful. I'm sick of this. See, it's in the frying pan where God creates his masterpieces. Have you ever had bacon before? Okay, end the story. Bacon, so good. The frying pan. See, God is the master chef. In the frying pan is where he prepares his masterpieces. God moves beyond our mistakes. He brings good out of bad. He does not limit his plan to the spiritual elite, and he has given us exactly what we need in this moment to accomplish what we will do in the future. This is so reflective of what Jesus has done for us. See, Jesus moved beyond our sin and made us good by the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. Jesus brings us into his family. Normal people who make mistakes every single day. And he has given us exactly what we need in this moment to accomplish his plan. So when you feel like you are being put in the frying pan, remember that this is where God prepares his masterpieces. Remember what God does and rest in the fact that he has it all figured out and we can trust him one day.